Welcome to today's episode of Chris's Classic Cinema. I'm Chris Wyert.
And I'm Jayden.
So, the holidays have come and gone. It's already January, but that's not gonna stop us from watching Christmas movies.
Comment in the description if you're watching on YouTube and haven't taken down your Christmas decorations yet. You know who you are.
And trust me, I have seen some houses that still have lights up.
Oh gosh, over in Deerfield, there's a Christmas bomb. Christmas vomit house right off of the main highway. You know the one if you've been through it. You know the one.
Yeah. So today we're going to be looking at 4 classic Christmas movies. Some of them you might not have heard of. Others are basically as iconic as the ones you can think of. Now, when it comes to these movies in general, most of them are comedies. There's one that's very, very dramatic.
Yes, very, very dramatic.
But I can tell you, these movies are really something.
They are.
Yeah. What do you say we rock and roll?
Yeah.
With that in mind, for our first film, we're going back to 1940. Now, this was made 6 years before Now, this stars James Stewart, but it is not It's a Wonderful Life. This was made 6 years before that movie. This movie, The Shop Around the Corner. In Budapest, Hungary, 2 store workers who just can't stand each other don't even realize that they're secret pen pals who are basically falling in love with the other. And there's some complications too. I mean, the guy gets fired because his boss thinks he's having an affair with his wife, but it is not him. And this is definitely a different sort of rom-com.
It is. You'll notice that there's going to be actually a lot of similarities to a later movie done by Tom Hanks, known as You Got Mail. So the 2 movies have very, very similar storylines.
Well, I think that this movie was an inspiration for that.
It was.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to this movie, this is my first time seeing it, and I thought it was really interesting.
I thought it was pretty interesting as well. It didn't really feel so much like a Christmas movie to me. It felt like, a lot like Die Hard in that sense, where a lot of people will argue that Die Hard is a Christmas movie because it takes place on Christmas. I'd argue it's not, and that Christmas is more of the setting than anything. And I'd argue that for this movie too. I mean, yeah, Christmas is in the setting, and it's definitely in the air, but it's not the main focus of the story.
That is true. With that in mind, let's talk about the cast.
Yeah.
You have the 2 leads, James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan.
I'll be honest, I enjoyed James Stewart in this more than It's a Wonderful Life.
Really?
I did. I felt that the casting I felt that this was more of a him character. That this character fit him a lot better than with It's a Wonderful Life. Because my biggest problem with It's a Wonderful Life was, and I think I alluded to this in other episodes prior, is that there was a bit of a disconnect when they were playing back some of the younger scenes of James Stewart. You're talking about a guy that looks like he's north of 30 playing as a teenager. It felt kind of forced in that scenario, whereas this felt a lot more like in his element.
That I can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the girl Margaret Sullivan who, at first she just wants a job.
Oh yeah.
And the guy, Jimmy Stewart, is willing to help her, but as the months go by, they end up just
bickering.
Yeah.
There's a lot of depth with both characters, isn't there? I mean, okay, not as much depth with James Stewart, because he really is getting the short end of the stick for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
Because, you could see that he does have some literacy skills behind him, but most of his literacy skills just comes from his ability to recollect past literature works and then just switch some of the words around.
Yeah, and like I said, they don't even know that they're secret pen pals.
Exactly. And of course the female protagonist was also had a lot of depth. In writing, this very eloquently spoken person, very well spoken, very pretty, very polite. Whereas in this, she's very much stuck in her ways, very much, not stuck in her ways or stubborn per se, but definitely was the kind of person that wanted to take charge of the situation and wanted to be shown that she was in the right.
Yeah. I gotta admit that the chemistry between them is really good.
It's very, very good.
Yeah. And then you have other characters too, especially the boss of the store, played by the original Wizard of Oz himself, Frank Morgan.
And did a fantastic job. You have this character who has a very calm demeanor at the very, at first glance, he has a very calm demeanor. Very retail friendly.
But he isn't. But he does have his outbursts.
He does have his outbursts, as any boss would.
Yeah, and as the movie progresses, we see that there's more to him than meets the eye.
Oh yeah.
He thinks one of his employees is having an affair with his wife.
Oh yeah, what a twist, huh?
Yeah.
I really like that twist in the movie, especially towards the end.
But as the movie progresses, we see him become more like a friendlier boss to his employees.
Right. Well, it's even alluded to that at the beginning of the film, isn't it? How they got along. How he and the lead star got along very, very well for quite a while.
Yeah, but then as years passed, it started to go downhill.
It did go downhill for a little bit because of the affair.
Yes.
Hence why, the dinner party, just to kind of do a vibe check.
Yeah.
Which I think was a very pragmatic thing to do in that scenario.
Yeah. You also have other characters too. I mean, there's that one employee who is very noble. He's also basically Jimmy Stewart's best friend. He's willing to stand up for him no matter what.
Yeah, it was a German. I believe he was a German actor, if I'm not mistaken.
But he also is very reluctant. Whenever the boss
asks for an opinion, up the stairs he goes.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
You also have other characters like Joseph Skillkraut as another employee who is sort of shadowy. You can tell that he's sort of ambitious.
Yeah. I believe, and then was that the person that got promoted to be a clerk later in the movie?
No, that was another character. But
that was my favorite character in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, at first he's just a delivery boy.
Yeah.
But because of something very good that he does get promoted.
Man, I loved it when he storms in with the suit and tie into the store and lays all the cards on the table, it makes everybody in shock and awe, basically, and then he just calmly goes, as soon as he slams on the phone, draw your own conclusions, and just walks off. I died. I thought that was the funniest part of the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie, not only is it a comedy, but it's also a drama, because there's some pretty dramatic elements in this.
There are a lot of really dramatic elements.
I don't want to give any spoilers, but it can be it can get
serious. It does have a lot of serious moments.
Especially when it comes to the whole affair situation.
Yeah.
You can tell how much it's tormenting the boss.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, and now let's talk about the production, because
Pretty good production value.
I mean, the art direction for the store is just amazing. And it really has that old school general store feel to it.
It does, but notice there isn't that many settings. You get the main storefront, of course. You get the main store.
Then the restaurant.
Then you get the restaurant. Then you get the office, and then you get the room.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are all four. Those are all four scenes.
Yeah, but still, this movie was actually made pretty cheap.
It was. Yeah. Like, you can tell the movie was done on the cheap, but at the same time, it is 1940. So it isn't like they needed Panavision or anything like that. That wasn't a thing yet. Plus, it was wartime.
That is true. I mean, yeah, and frankly, I think maybe it was because they had way more production value when it came to, like, say, The Wizard of Oz, since MGM was doing that movie at the time too.
Yeah. But it goes to show that you don't really need, and this has been proven many, many, many times, that you don't need high production for a good story. And I felt that it was a really good story. And
surprisingly enough, I noticed that there's no music in the movie at all. No. Only in the beginning credits and right at the ending.
It doesn't need it. It's not needed. It's not necessary.
It almost felt like we were watching a play or something.
I believe there was a playwright.
That is true. This movie was actually based on a play made by a Hungarian.
Yes. Yeah. So it was done as a playwright. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting take. I mean, normally you would have like background music in some of those scenes, but
1940,
there wasn't that.
1940, you didn't have the budget, like, honestly, because think about how the kind of splicing that you need to do to add in music post. That's really difficult to do, even in like nowadays it's really easy, but in 1940, you need to be an MGM or Disney or a big production studio to allocate those kind of resources for a movie.
That I can agree with. And there's also other good things too, like costumes are very modern.
Oh yeah.
The film editing is very impressive.
It is. It's done very well.
Yeah, and the cinematography really gives you that old home feel to it.
It gives you a medium-sized town feel, I'd argue. Medium-sized town is probably what I'd say, like a Zanesville or a Beloit or a Sheboygan.
And like I said, this movie takes place in Budapest, Hungary. And this was just when World War II was starting.
This was on the eve of war, yeah.
I mean, this was made around this. If it was Budapest, Hungary at the time in real life, who knows what it was like, especially after the Nazis invaded Poland.
Right. I think it was actually occupied by the Third Reich at the time, but I don't. You can edit that bit out.
Well, we don't know. Surprisingly enough, even though this movie was pretty good, it didn't get any Oscar nominations at all.
Not surprising.
But Jimmy Stewart actually did win an Oscar that same year. It was for another rom-com with Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, The Philadelphia Story. It was the only Oscar he won in his entire career.
And this movie was actually, we've mentioned before, it was the inspiration for It's a Wonderful Life. If it weren't for this movie...
You mean You've Got Mail?
Well, no, It's a Wonderful Life, because it was because of Jimmy Stewart's performance in this movie that he got casted later in It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, that's cool. I also know that the American Film Institute did put this film in their list of top 100 romantic movies.
Right.
Yeah, and the romance is there. I mean,
it's definitely there, and it's definitely a little bit more modest.
Yeah, and it's also preserved in the National Film Registry.
And the Library of Congress.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so I gotta say, for a first time seeing this, I thought it was really good.
That was good.
For a score, I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 stars.
I agree. 4 out of 5 is basically what I give it as well. I have nothing bad to say about the movie. It's aged quite well. The story is done pretty well. I have nothing bad to say about this movie.
Plus, I said the drama is pretty good.
Oh yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. So that was The Shop Around the Corner. For our next film, we're going ahead to 1947 with another classic Christmas comedy. Now, this was the same year as 2 other movies that we reviewed last year for our last Christmas episode. First, there was Miracle on 34th Street, then The Bishop's Wife. For this film, it happened on 5th Avenue.
A lot going down in New York at that time. 47 Christmas in New York City was very busy.
Yeah. In New York City, a bunch of homeless people find themselves a home in a millionaire's mansion. Little do they know that one of the occupants is actually the daughter of the millionaire, who actually persuades her father to let them live while pretending to be a homeless guy. Now, I gotta admit, I did get a few good laughs out of this.
There are some quirky elements that were interesting. I wasn't as big of a fan as this movie, personally, because I felt that a lot of the scenes were quite hokey and forced. But I get that's kind of the intent of the movie, too.
I mean, it's supposed to be pure comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, this came out the same year as Miracle on 34th Street, so it definitely had some competition.
Not only did it have competition, it came from an up-and-coming studio that had never been taken seriously in the film industry before. The company Monogram, this was their first major, big box office film with a serious production value. Over $1 million, which was insane money back then.
Yeah.
Because before this, Monogram, it was mainly a B-movie studio. So they wanted to be taken more seriously, and this was the story they went with.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the cast.
Mm-hmm.
First, you have the girl who plays the millionaire's daughter, Gail Storm.
Yeah.
I swear, no offense to her up there, but I swear that's the sort of name you have for a superhero.
Yeah, and unfortunately, was criminally underrated in the movie and underutilized in my opinion.
I mean, she had. I mean, she definitely has a lot of. She actually was pretty clever.
Well, in the movie, yes, a really, really good actor, actress, very good with acting, but a lot of her skills were underutilized, unfortunately, because of the lip sync scenes.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's one of the reasons why the movie kind of creases me a little bit, because
her voice was dubbed.
Her voice was dubbed by a different singer altogether, and you can tell.
I noticed that as well.
And it's a shame because she actually has a really, really good singing voice, and she actually took singing lessons and rehearsed the songs with some of the pre-production people.
I take it you heard some of them?
No, but you could. I've heard her in other things, But there's an interview that she did in the 1980s where she was vastly disappointed and kind of saddened that she wasn't able to sing in that movie.
Huh. I never knew that. You also have her boyfriend, who is a GI who just got evicted from an apartment.
Now that scene was good. I like that scene.
I mean, he's literally handcuffs himself to his bed.
So they take the bed too.
Yeah.
They evict the bed with him on it.
Yeah. And then you have the guy who actually keeps sneaking into the house to have it. The guy played by Victor Moore.
Yes,
and he is just so. I love him. He's just,
definitely carries a bit of prestigious on his shoulder, even though he has no right to.
I mean, you have a guy literally trespassing onto a millionaire's property,
and then
he literally slips through the back fence, goes through a pothole,
and then also admits to doing this with other houses year round.
Yes.
Like literally will travel down to West Virginia in the to the guy's winter home, so literally a serial squatter.
But you just can't help but like him.
He's a lovable character. I liked him a lot.
Plus his dog is so cute.
His dog was really cute.
And then you have and next they're bringing in more homeless people.
A lot of people, yeah.
Two of them. There's whole families that are also former members of the GI's troop. And then you have the millionaire himself, played by Charlie Ruggles.
Yeah.
And you can tell how he's basically way out of his elements.
Way out of his element, highly annoyed at everything all the time, which you can blame. You can feel the resentment under each breath he takes. You can feel it through the screen.
I mean, you have this millionaire pretending to be a homeless guy
in his own house.
Yeah, and even when he's talking to his businessmen on the phone, they think he's delusional.
Not delusional, never worked a day in his life, chipped some of the dishes, washed his own dishes. He doesn't do that. He's the second richest guy in America. He doesn't do that.
But he does have character development, especially when it comes to him with his ex-wife.
Oh,
who ends up also becoming an occupant as well.
Yes, at Trudy's insistence, yes.
Yes, and I actually do love how they rekindle their relationship.
That part was very, very nice. I did like that part.
Yeah, and you know what? You just gotta root for those guys. I mean, it does make sense. I mean, this was post-World War II. I'm pretty sure. I can't imagine how housing was at that time.
Well, it was very jarring for a lot of GI members to kind of, you've been in the war, you were literally paraded around as a war hero, and now what? Seriously, now what? You find a job and you settle down? A lot of these GIs were tooled up from the war still. Some of them not just tooled up, but also had very traumatic experiences and just with bad PTSD and couldn't go back to work. So a lot of GIs had despite the GI Bill being one of the most aggressive and most progressive things of the 20th century for a lot of our veterans, there was still a lot of struggle to be had.
Yeah, well, along with that, there's also the. I also love how they came out with the idea of using barracks as alternative homes for.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and there are real life examples where that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let's talk about the production because I gotta say the sets are so good. I love the mansion.
$1.2 million. It ought to be. You could definitely tell that mansion screams. It just screams big money, not old wealth or new wealth, just wealth.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I also just, and when it comes to some of the scenes too, I mean, they're just so good. I mean, I mean, you just see them celebrating Christmas Eve. They're singing carols. Next thing you know, two cops come in, and they're like, you know what? You can stay here till New Year's. Merry Christmas.
Exactly. Definitely a different time in America.
I mean, yeah, and like I said, I just love how that millionaire just feels so out of place. There are times when he just wants to snap.
Oh, he was so close sometimes, wasn't he?
Especially when they came through the. I mean, he's sleeping in the basement with the dog, and next you know his bed just
done. It's done. It's seen better days. But there's some sweet irony in that, isn't there? Because that was the maid's bed. That was the housekeeper's bed.
Yeah.
He bought that bed. That is his room. So it kind of shows how. It kind of alludes to how poorly he treated his staff before the movie starts.
Yeah. Along with that, there's also the fact that he was also bidding for the
same barracks so that he can build a freight airport, not a regular, not just any passenger airport.
Heck,
just a freight one.
Heck, the only reason why the GI was evicted from that building was because he was going to build a skyscraper where his apartment was.
Yep.
And he ended up calling the guy an octopus.
I don't think that's the only thing they called the guy.
That is true.
I mean, not only did they call him things, they threw things at what they thought was the guy.
That is true. Even the millionaire himself gets into it.
You have to keep up the bit. You have to commitment to the bit, man. You gotta commit for your daughter, right?
Yeah.
Man really, really, really loved his daughter, I guess.
Yeah, this movie was really funny. Yeah, if you're looking for a good Christmas comedy, I definitely recommend this.
All right.
Well, if anything, I don't recall this. I mean, also the music is great.
Really good music.
Well, of course, there was the whole dubbing situation that we already talked about.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those feel-good movies you just want to see around the holidays.
And I did have some problems with it, mainly with the dubbing and also, this overall story itself I felt was kind of goofy. I'm not really that much into goofy movies. I don't have a real good reason to dislike it. It just didn't really sit with me right. But still, it definitely is a quality movie for the holidays. If you want to have like a 47 Christmas New York City marathon, it's definitely one that you add in there.
Heck, this movie even earned an Oscar nomination for original story. Unfortunately, it lost to its main competition, Miracle on 34th Street.
Of course it would.
Yeah, but still, if you're looking for an alternative, I definitely would give this a watch. I definitely plan on watching this again, maybe next holiday season.
Nah, not for me. The other one, sure. The first one we did, sure. Yeah, but not this one.
Well, what are you going to give this then?
I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Most of the points I'm deducting is from the dubbing.
Yeah. I'm honestly giving it 4.5 out of 5 because I really love this. I mean, I just love the comedy. It's just so heartfelt, and I definitely recommend it. So that was It Happened on 5th Avenue. Now we're going ahead to 1968 with one that's rather unorthodox. I mean, this movie does take place on Christmas, but it's hardly talked about at all. If anything, this is more of a family drama. And it's not even set in the modern times. It takes place back in the Middle Ages. I mean, specifically the Christmas of the year 1183. So almost 850 years ago. Now, and this movie has, in my opinion, one of the best casts I've ever seen in a movie.
Oh, yeah. What a cast.
I am talking about the classic 1968 film, The Lion in Winter. During his reign, King Henry II invites his sons, as well as his wife, Queen Eleanor, to join him for the holidays. Unfortunately, due to squabbling between figuring out who is going to be the next ruler of England, the family is basically as dysfunctional as anyone could be. And there's complications too. I mean, the king is having an affair with a princess who also happens to be the half-sister of a visiting king who wants to form an alliance.
Who wants to maintain the alliance with France.
Yes. And then, like I said, his sons are ambitious. They have to figure out which one is going to be the next king.
Right. And they definitely all have like their own sort of glaring weaknesses that are kind of illustrated throughout the movie. Some more obvious than others.
But man, this movie was it really keeps you guessing the whole time.
It's really good. There is one big issue I had with it throughout the whole movie, and that is the audio mixing levels. There were some scenes that were just blaring your ears out, right? They're really, really loud. And then there were other scenes where they're talking really, really quiet and you couldn't understand a thing they're saying. You know, so a lot of volume adjusting. You can definitely tell it was filmed in England. You could definitely tell.
It was also filmed in France as well.
It was actually, more specifically, I think it was filmed in Wales and Scotland, and I think a little bit in Northern Ireland.
I recall in the credits it said it was filmed in Wales.
Okay.
Yeah. But still, the cast, like I said, this has got to be one of the best casts I've ever seen for a movie. You have huge names. I mean, you have Peter O'Toole, Katharine Hepburn, even modern stars of today like Anthony Hopkins and Timothy Dalton.
Right.
Both of them in their first film.
Yeah.
This was their first film.
This was a breakout role for both of those guys.
I mean, you have Hannibal Lecter and James Bond basically arguing with each other on this when in their first film, and it's just insane.
It is. You know, the story is extremely captivating as the story progresses, and it's also really kind of confusing. You wonder how the king and queen, because it's based on pseudo real life events, right? These were events that were
they were real people.
Well, historical accuracy is dubious at best.
This movie is not. I mean, historically, as far as we, I don't think this movie, this whole Christmas never happened.
No, the year before and after in the same town, but not that year.
Yeah, but still, and the thing is, they're able to condense so many years of family conflict into just one night. This movie literally takes place in almost at least one day.
Yeah, in about 2 days. Yeah, about a day and a half, really. It's interesting because the Queen, of course, at this time, she had been in prison for 10 years.
For trying to
undermine the king. And I believe also was involved with the poisoning of his second
I'm not
wife.
sure.
It's confusing. It's Middle Earth politics.
Middle Ages.
It's Middle Ages politics in Europe. It's going to be confusing. There's literally books on the chivalry stuff. Anyways,
let's talk about the cast because you have the two leads, Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn, and they are just perfect.
I mean, yeah. As I was about to say, like, she just comes out of prison for 10 years and then gets, and then has this really intense love-hate relationship with the king. They speak so fondly of each other, but it's all demeaning and has a bit of a sting to it.
And they just can't stand each other.
No, you can't
because
tell.
Because of their political aspects.
Not only that, but they almost love the fact that they can't stand each other. Because there's definitely passion in there. There's definitely some moments there where they really appreciate one another's hatred for one another, the undermining of it all. And it's like, this is interesting. Like, I could eat this up all day.
And the thing is, you never know you can never tell what's going on in their heads.
No, you can't.
It just keeps you guessing. And
And then you have the bishop, the bishop who is just sitting there in the background, just going, "Oh, okay, it's just another day in the office." You can tell he's done with everything.
Yeah, I mean, and when it comes to the
three princes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have Richard the Lionheart, played by Anthony Hopkins, then Jeffrey, and then Prince John, played by Nigel Terry.
And all three of them have their own, quirks and cunningness to them.
And they are both very ambitious.
All of them are.
John thinks that he's going to be king because he thinks he's the favorite. Richard thinks he should be king because he's next in line.
Yeah, he's the eldest.
And Jeffrey is basically trying to sneak his way into taking the crown from both of them.
Exactly. Because he's the middle child and underappreciated. Underestimated, as it were.
Yeah. And you know what? In real life, Richard actually did end up getting the throne.
And so did John.
That is true. First Richard died, and then King John took his place. And it was during King John's reign when the famous Magna Carta was made. He also ended up being the prince that was also in the legendary Robin Hood stories.
And it's interesting because you have three really distinct characters. You have the warrior himself, the would-be King Richard, who he definitely has a little bit of drama that I'm not going to spoil, but he is definitely the warrior of the three. And then you have the planner, the cunning, or the schemer, Jeffrey. He's the schemer. And then you got the whiner who whines his way into everything because he's the baby of the family, John.
That is a perfect way to explain it.
Yes, so I really enjoyed the three of them, especially when they were all sharing scenes together, trying to outwit each other, but they all fall short for some reason or another.
Yeah. And then you have, and like I said, Anthony Hopkins plays Richard. And this was his first film, and he just nails it.
He does.
And then you have the visiting king, Philip, and his half-sister, Elise, who happens to be King Henry's mistress.
And not the only mistress. That's one of the few historical details they got wrong is King Henry had a lot of mistresses and a lot more children than the four that are mentioned.
Heck, even Catherine Hepburn is actually a descendant of Eleanor of Aquitaine. From two sides.
Yeah. So, again, middle-aged shenanigans, if you want peak shenanigans, just look at the Habsburgs.
Yeah, well, still, this is, I mean, when it comes to Elise, you can tell that she basically feels like, I mean, she wants to be with Henry. She loves him very much. But
loves Henry for Henry, not just the kingdom.
But then there's a whole political aspect where she is supposed to be betrothed to Richard.
Richard or John, whoever's next to be king.
I mean, King Philip wants to hold the alliance with him, and it's also implied that he and Richard could have been lovers.
Which is up for debate, but yes, that was very much.
There is still a debate going on nowadays if Richard was actually gay.
Yeah.
I mean, but still, this cast, I mean, they just have so much chemistry.
It's so good. This kind of family drama it's home. I'm kidding, no, it's not home.
It's like something.
It's so great.
It's like I swear, you almost feel like you're watching a reality show.
It's so good, yeah. Especially the climax in the wine cellar. It's so good.
Yeah.
With King, the king, being, disowning all three of his kids, and just, you could feel the pain and agony as he's screaming through the halls of his kingdom, and then pivoting hard to wanting to marry and get the girl for himself and father more children so that he could have a legitimate son, and it's just like.
And the fact that all this happens in just one night.
Yeah.
That's just insane.
It is. It is insane.
Like the Queen told herself, like the Queen said, every family has their ups and downs.
Every family has their ups and downs, and then towards the end they also said, how did we end up like this? And then the king just solemnly goes, one step at a time.
Now when it comes, the script is just so good.
It's a really solid script.
It's actually an adaptation of a play written by the same guy who did the script,
yes.
James Goldman.
It failed. It was a bomb in the office when the original playwright actually failed miserably. It was a failure initially.
But it did get some critical love on Broadway.
Yeah.
I mean, the original cast included Rosemary Harris, Christopher Walken, and Robert Preston.
Right.
Rosemary Harris actually won a Tony for playing Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
But I can definitely tell that this cast is just incredible. And when it comes to production too, I mean, you have this whole castle.
You do, but that was very bad. You know, France and Wales has a lot of castles.
That is true.
There are some other issues. Again, the production is one thing I kind of take issue with a little bit, especially with the audio quality. You know, but this is also Britain in the '60s, which was it's about on par for what I'd expect from a British production from the 1960s with the audio quality.
But you gotta admit, the costumes and cinematography are so good.
Fantastic, especially the lighting, and you know, just setting aside everything, the subtlety of the music.
Yes, the music scored by John Barry.
Very, very subtle, sprinkled in at the most intense moments, the moments that that really need to draw the most attention.
I mean, you have this whole sequence of just Queen Eleanor on a boat going to the castle, but he makes it sound like the grandest entrance you can imagine.
Yeah.
With them even with a whole choir singing Latin.
Yeah, and you almost think to yourself that this is gonna be, a beautiful woman, making an entourage of sorts, and that was the kind of message being portrayed, wasn't it?
Yeah, but still, I mean, the music is gorgeous.
It is very subtle, very period. I quite liked it.
Yeah, and this was the same year as Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. That's Planet of the Apes had a lot better production value, it being a more of American film.
Yeah, but still, this movie is just so good.
It is. I really, really enjoyed it.
It was a huge hit at the box office.
Mm-hmm.
It received 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Costume Design.
Yeah.
It ended up winning 3. Best Actress for Katharine Hepburn, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. That's right, John Barry actually beat Planet of the Apes.
Good. It deserved.
And famously, Katharine Hepburn actually ended up tying for Best Actress with Barbra Streisand in her film debut of Funny Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And man, you could tell that was definitely a tight competition that year.
It was. And you could definitely understand why it would have lost in some areas and won in some areas. Because again, the production value was pretty good, but there were minor details that he and I amongst you are going to see and go, wait, that's not right. Like the Christmas tree.
That is true. We didn't even talk about the Christmas aspects. It's hardly mentioned at all in the film. I mean,
yeah.
You literally see Queen Eleanor wrapping presents when that didn't even.
Yeah, I looked it up. It did. That goes as far back as the 300 BC.
Yeah, well,
but not in Christianity. That's the key here. And the Christmas trees.
They did
not 500 years.
Yeah, that is true. Now, when it comes to also Peter O'Toole is nominated for the Oscar for Best Actor. Mm-hmm. He lost, but ended up winning a Golden Globe, and the film even earned the Golden Globe for Best Drama Motion Picture.
Right. And let's talk about.
And 1968 was a very big year. I mean, Planet of the Apes, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And not only this, but this was the movie that actually had producers go up to Timothy after the movie was done with, and it's run its course, and it was like, you want to be Bond, and
yes, they wanted him to be the next James Bond after Sean Connery. He thought he was too young, so they brought in George Lazenby for the film On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
Then Sean Connery would return. Then Roger Moore would do 7 films, and then Timothy Dalton would actually do James Bond in the late 80s in 2 films.
Yeah.
The Living Daylights and License to Kill.
Which, in my opinion, was the right call. He was very young in that movie, very handsome, very young. He's portraying a really mature for his age 17-year-old in the movie.
I mean,
So I think it was the right call to have him age another 20 years.
that I can agree with. And when it comes to also, I know that there was actually also a TV remake of this movie back in the early 2000s with Patrick Stewart and Glenn Close.
I did see that, yeah.
I saw that too. In fact, Glenn Close even won a Golden Globe for her performance as Eleanor.
I believe there was also a radio performance of it as well.
Yeah, I think there was as well. But still, when it comes to this movie, it's just so good.
I liked it. What are you going to give the rating?
4.5 out of 5 stars.
I'll give it 4.5. I'll give it 4.5.
If anything, I wouldn't quite call this a Christmas movie. More of just a general drama.
You want a drama movie based in the Middle Ages that isn't Lord of the Rings? This one.
Or if anything, you want a drama set in the Middle Ages compared to like Braveheart or say
yeah. If you're into old British films, this is a must, in my opinion.
Especially if you're looking for one that deals with like not only dysfunctional families but also politics of that time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, this movie is, man, I'm almost tempted to see it again.
Me too. I am. This has been one of my favorite movies that we've watched thus far.
So that was The Lion in Winter. For our final film, we're going ahead to 1989 with a pure comedy. And this is considered one of the funniest Christmas movies ever. And it was written by none other than the writer of Home Alone, John Hughes. And this was made just 1 year before he did Home Alone.
Mm-hmm.
I am talking about National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. The Griswold family is preparing for Christmas in Chicago. The father wants to have the best Christmas possible. Unfortunately, everything that can go wrong does go wrong.
It's Murphy's Law, the movie, but with Christmas.
That's a perfect way to say it. And man, this movie is hysterical.
It's so good. There's so many iconic and funny scenes. And the intro for the movie. Oh, it's the same intro as any National Harpoon movie, except the recent one, where it's just really iconic.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of my favorite. It's one of my top 3 favorite movies that has an RV in it.
What are the other 2, dare I ask?
RV and Spaceballs.
Okay.
You asked.
I honestly did expect RV.
That's a good movie.
Yeah, well, with anything, let's talk about the cast. I mean, you have Chevy Chase, and he's just at his peak.
This is Chevy Chase at his peak in the 1980s, where he's doing anything and everything, right? Like, from Caddyshack all the way to this,
And he just wants to he says himself, he wants this to be the happiest Christmas since Big Crosby danced with Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
In White Christmas.
Mm-hmm. And there were some, but man, did everything else have other plans to make sure he had the worst Christmas ever.
Yeah.
He tried so hard. He was so positive right up till the end.
He
almost made it until his boss came over.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have Beverly D'Angelo as his wife, who is very supportive, but does know when it's time to call it quits.
Right.
Yeah. And then you have the kids, one of them being Johnny Galecki, who is now known for playing Leonard in the sitcom The Big Bang Theory.
Mm-hmm. He also played as the boyfriend in Roseanne.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then you have other characters. I mean, you have Clark Griswold's parents who are rather. His dad is kind of.
Not to mention you have the brother-in-law with the and his wife with their family.
Well, the cousin, I should say.
It is a cousin. Okay, I thought it was brother-in-law.
Yeah, the cousin-in-law played by Randy Quaid, and he's just
Randy Quaid again at his peak. This was him at his peak. He was peaking from the mid '80s all the way into around the year 2000.
Yeah, and man, he's just. I mean, that whole scene with. I mean, some of those scenes are just so hysterical.
Iconic. is what I would say. It's some of the most iconic things ever. Like,
You
to
also-
this day, you have people who will still go all out with Christmas lights because of this movie.
Yes, the whole Griswold aspect of it. I mean, that whole house is just... I mean, the fact that it caused the blackout.
Right, right. Not to mention the world's deadliest sled. You know, the flying saucer that literally flames behind you. It's like, that's impressive. That is impressive. I've always wanted a sled like, every kid back in the day wanted a sled that fast, right? Every kid back then.
Yeah, and you have other characters too. I mean, one of them you have Clark's aunt, played by Mae Questel, who is actually famous for being the original voice of the cartoon character Betty Boop.
Yeah.
And this was the fact that she was still acting at that age. It's still, I mean, a year earlier she did Betty Boop in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other characters like the boss, played by Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother.
Yep.
And he's very snarky. He's very tough.
He's very tough, very snarky, and decides, you know, that this year he's going to do something different with the Christmas bonus that terribly backfires.
Yeah. And then you have the neighbors, one of them played by Julie Louis-Dreyfus, who was actually that same year starting her role of Elaine in Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
And man, this cast is hysterical.
It's a great cast. Again, this was the right cast, the right time for these people. You know, this was a movie that hit the right time with the right cast. You know, it could have only been these guys, right? Yeah, you probably could have thrown in Bill Murray somewhere or something like that, but let's just say the 80s was probably one of the best decades ever for comedy, in my opinion, and this was one of the crown jewels, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the script, like I said, it was written by John Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, like I said, this was 1 year before he did Home Alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can definitely tell how it has the slapstick elements of Home Alone.
It does. It does have a lot of slapstick elements. You know, like one slapstick element, of course, is the squirrel scenes.
Yes. Yeah, and then you have other things too. I mean, you have the uncle lighting a cigar, and then the tree just blows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you also have, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, yeah, that whole scene with
World's driest turkey.
Yes. And then you have the aunt. Instead of doing a blessing, she does the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. I forgot about that until just now.
Yeah, and I mean, but it also does have some heart to it as well.
It does.
I mean, there's that whole scene of him stuck in the attic watching old Christmas home movies. You can definitely tell that basically motivates him to make this the best Christmas possible.
Right, and there's definitely some really, really heartfelt family moments. You know, National Harpoon Vacation had that traditionally where it's a lot of slapstick, and towards the end, everybody comes together in the end as a family and actually has a proper Christmas.
Yeah, but yeah, well, if only it wasn't as hard as they had it. I mean, there's also some of those scenes too. They're just hysterical.
Yeah, because they live on. Because even to this day, you know, there was a commercial not too long ago that aired that was basically redoing the Christmas light scene.
Oh yeah, that's right. Heck, even I recall when I was in Cottage Grove, I saw an inflatable Clark Griswold.
I have a coworker that wears a Clark Griswold jacket. That literally wears the denim jacket, the infamous, the famous denim jacket.
Yeah.
With Griswold embroidered right onto it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's definitely one of those movies that it's a comedy that isn't quite in the limelight anymore, but it has a legacy impact that a lot of people like to bond and laugh over.
Another example would be A Christmas Story. It didn't start out that popular at first, but now you have 24-hour marathons on TBS every Christmas day.
Not only that, every single time I go into a thrift store on the holidays, there's bound to be one leg lamp.
Yeah. And now when it comes to the production, I mean, what can I say? I mean, they wanted to make this as great a comedy as possible.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, even though it's set around Chicago, they actually filmed it in Colorado.
Yeah.
And LA.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it because I think they did a very good job kind of depicting any typical suburban outer city suburbia, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes, I guess there's no way you could see it. Get a Christmas tree that big out in like Illinois.
No, you have to go to Wisconsin. No, you have to come up here. You have to come up here for that.
Yeah.
I've been to Illinois. It's flat land. There is no trees down. There's some trees, but not that big. You're going to Illinois. You're going up to Wisconsin. You are driving up over the border.
Yeah, well, and also that, I love how that whole, when it comes to the light, the scene where he turns the lights and the Hallelujah chorus comes out, that's just perfect.
Yeah. And everything is lit like a Christmas, everything is lit up super bright.
And that was just after he was basically doing a tantrum and kicking some of the stuff on the yard.
Oh yeah, it didn't work at first, yeah.
Yeah, and all it took was this one switch.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, the neighbors, they're blinded by the lights.
One of the best things ever.
Yeah, this movie is just hysterical. And when it comes, the cast is just so good.
This is actually the movie that inspired my significant other's family to say that they would never do turkey again. They've just done ham ever since. Both Thanksgiving and Christmas. They will only do ham because of this movie. And I don't blame them. I don't. The puff of stench. Sure, we're going to use that. I can smell the dry turkey from here. The dry turkey, it's turkey jerky. It's tasteless, dry turkey jerky. And they tried so hard to be polite and eat it anyways. They tried. Oh boy.
Yeah, well.
It's just like a biscuit from the Civil War. Just, you gotta dip it in more gravy to soften it.
Stop, you're killing me. Oh my god. This movie is just hysterical. If you're looking for a great comedy, this is it.
It is. It's a classic comedy.
Surprisingly, even though it was a modest success at the box office, it did get mixed reviews when it was first released, but now it's just...
It's a classic. But what National Lampoon movie isn't, you know?
Yeah, think about Animal House. There's that whole toga scene.
Toga. I tried... Okay, after we're done.
Yeah, well... All in all, what would you give this movie?
I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5.
Me too.
But because I'm deducting 1 point for one reason only, and that's it's my biggest problem with National Lampoon Vacation as a whole, is that the recurring cast isn't. You only have Chevy Chase as the common denominator. That's it.
That is true.
That's my only complaint with National Lampoon's, Lampoon is that there is no consistency from film to film.
I'll do 4 out of 5 too because personally I prefer Home Alone. I think John Hughes did a great job on that.
Yeah.
He did a great job with Christmas Vacation, no doubt about that. But Home Alone definitely had a lot more heart to it.
Right.
This one is just straight up comedy, but still, it is hysterical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're next holiday season, if you're wanting to laugh your guts out, this is a must-watch.
I agree. I do. I agree.
Yeah. So that was our Christmas episode. For our next episode, we're actually going to be doing something different. We're going to be looking at 4 animated movies that were made for TV, created by the popular animation studio Hanna-Barbera. I'm talking about the guys that did those iconic cartoons of the 60s, like the Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, and then they just kept on going all the way through the 80s.
Yeah. So I hope you all had a great time with this episode, because I definitely did.
Yeah, this was a good one.
Till then, I'm Chris Wyatt.
And I'm Jayden.
Thanks for watching this episode of Chris's Classic Cinema. We'll see you next time.